I was just listening to Steph Curry talk about some of his like workouts and stuff. He's obsessed with the details. He doesn't just put up 1,000 shots. He tries to track what part of the rim did it hit as it went in. The more granular you get with all those little details, the more present and aware and like focus you're putting on that stuff. When you go to play in front of an entire arena, he's thought about it 4 or 5 times deeper than most of the people that are doing it. I think you can apply the same thing to drums.
Welcome, everybody, to Nashville Drummers Podcast, episode 25.
Today's guest is someone that I'm sure most people know.
As long as you're not living under a rock.
It's kind of even hard to give him a fully deserving bio, but truly just a wizard and just a very resourceful, awesome dude, Mr. Tim Buell. And we talk a lot about having guests on that. I mean, obviously we want to learn about their drumming background. And we definitely still get into that with Tim. He's someone that has hit all facets of the industry, from touring to doing sessions. Of course, many of you may know him from his transcription work as well.
He does just a little bit of that.
He dabbles.
Yeah.
We go into a whole range of topics on this one.
Well, and it's like you said, it is a really spanning conversation. And we, for a long time in the podcast, don't really talk about drums. And to be honest, those are my favorite ones, when they just naturally lead into one topic and the next and the next and the next.
Yeah, Tim he has his own podcast as well. You should definitely check that out. You're Good, Get Better. This was a really good example of that kind of an episode where we can just extract, like, okay, you're a drummer and let's figure out the things that make you successful or the things that you're doing really well that hopefully others obviously find value in.
Mm-hmm. We hope you enjoy episode 25, Nashville Drummers Podcast.
Hey, I have an icebreaker that I thought of in the car ride over, and I was like...
Is it Fat Penguin?
I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
It's just what's to break the ice.
I was getting there. Yeah. No.
This is sober Nate. By the way.
This is
it's going to be a long few hours.
Yeah. What is the last piece of art? So this is music, movie, TV, book, actual art installation. What is the last piece of art you consumed that brought you to tears?
Damn.
Oh.
That's a good question.
While you all are thinking, I will say for me it is my wife and I are rewatching Euphoria. And I would say like almost every episode of Euphoria, there's at least one scene that makes me either want to cry or actually just cry. That show to me is like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's the first show since Mad Men that I feel like perfectly nails like an overall, every step of the way, like aesthetic, like lighting, cinematography, writing, character, performance, all of it is just like, this is so perfectly this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mad Men was the first show that I saw do that. So there's a lot of scenes in Mad Men that I'm just like, how could any group of people ever create something that just feels so perfectly, like artistically congealed together?
Whoa.
So like, yeah, Euphoria. It's for me.
Wow.
Okay.
This is what we get for interviewing another podcast guy. He's coming out with this is great.
This is my podcast now.
I mean, do you have something in mind, or? I have like a very lame small example. I want to say it was like one of the Harry Potters. It was like the last scene in like the soundtrack.
Sure.
It's like the very last scene, like the orchestra plays, and I think it's one of the latter ones.
Yeah.
But it's also just the plot, if you're a Harry Potter fan, for what that moment means.
Sure.
And the music is there. And I think I saw it in theaters. So again, I wasn't in tears, but I was like at that level.
I love those. Well, you know what? Actually, you know what gets me every time is Hagrid's response to seeing Harry there to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
He's so upset that
Wait,
Harry,
is that what you're going to say?
No.
Okay.
But
it's like, wow, we all chose
within that,
movies.
I'm like, oh my God, that gets me choked up every time.
Yeah.
Actually, today I was not quite, but I was like full chills and like kind of starting to get misty. That was just today. It was a song called Night Spinners by, I posted it because I just was so blown away by it.
I like that music can, I think the whole reason I thought of that as an icebreaker is because I feel like, especially on a podcast where like, we're all like nerds about drums and stuff. Like, it can be easy to forget that like what we do is only a really tiny part of like why anyone would ever like buy an album.
Yes,
100%.
You would buy an album to like have the music as a whole move you, not just be like, Gad's drums in the chorus is just so like, that's not really why.
Exactly.
Like,
Yep.
that might be something that you also can get fulfillment out of, but like it's really easy for me at least to like forget that no one's gonna care if like the paradiddle wasn't quite as crisp as like intended or whatever. Like
when I think of my
make people
favorite
feel?
songs, it's not even because of the drums.
Yeah.
To your point, it's the whole song, the music, lyrics, melody, whatever.
Well, and to that point, I spent several years of my life not really listening to music, really listening to I listened to like a bunch of TED Talks and things of that nature where I'm like figuring out high performance stuff. And that stuff all served my drumming. But then I had this moment where I suddenly realized I'm not listening to music.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into music for drumming. I got into drumming for music.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, drumming, I liked the drums. And that was my vehicle to be a part of music. And I really, obviously, have developed some obsession over rhythmic things. But the center kernel of that thing was a love of music. So it was stupid for me not to be consuming that regularly. And it's Night Spinner by George Brooks, Zakir Hussain, and Jack Perla.
Oh, sick.
Man.
Don't know that.
Holy
Zakir
moly.
Hussain is the only name I recognize immediately, but
It's like tabla and soprano sax for the first several minutes, and it was within seconds. I was like, whoa, like on another level.
That's awesome.
Oh, you know what? I just thought of this, and this is perfect because of our connection with PASIC. And you said art installation. So at this year's event, they had, it was super, I mean, it was weird, but people kept saying, you got to go check this. It was like room 125 of the convention center. This is in the middle of all the drum clinics, right? So Dave Weckl, Benny Gray, Mike Johnson.
Yeah, this year
all
was
these guys were giving clinics, and then everyone's like,
crazy.
no, you got to go check out room 125. Just trust me. And it was called A World Without Ice. And it was literally, I think it was like 6 or 8. It was like a suspended cymbal stand, but instead of a cymbal, it was actual ice cubes. And it was dripping onto different floor tom sizes. So it was literally just dripping. That was it. But as you can imagine, it all created different tones, and it was all random. And then there was a projector that had like some visual elements as like a screensaver kind of thing. But it was the coolest thing I've seen probably all year.
Very cool.
I'm obsessed with that idea now.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Wow.
Going to see, I was just talking to a neighbor of mine, and he was talking about how he and his family just went and saw, there's like an installation right now that's like projecting, I think it's Monet or Van Gogh, one of them. I think it's Van Gogh, actually. They're probably like 20-foot tall walls. It's like a real industrial looking place, and they're just projecting like all of his art on these huge walls. So like you're pretty much just literally immersed in an entire room of like it.
Yeah.
And he was saying it was like really, really cool, really powerful. But he was also saying that they were playing a bunch of music with it. And I was like, it's an interesting thing to like think about like Van Gogh being paired with like, I don't know, Led Zeppelin or something. It's like, I don't know if like, how would Van Gogh feel about this? It's an interesting thing to try and pair. And I think that's what people get wrong a lot. Like that goes back to like Euphoria and stuff. Like to have something that looks beautiful and have people in a show performing such great performances and have a plot and a script that's so great. That's all hard enough. But then sometimes you can have all of that, and then like the music they pick, whether you like are consciously aware of it or not, is the one thing keeping you from like totally getting lost in it.
Yeah.
You're just like, I don't know. And I feel like sometimes when you're like at a concert, it's the same thing where you're like not fully engaged, and you're just kind of like, there's just something not right. So I think it's like an interesting thing to like think about what Van Gogh would do if he walked in to an installation of his work and they were playing like Kesha or something, and he was just like, the hell is this?
Have you guys seen like someone, probably more than one person, has like what those composers would look like in today's world with like AI?
No.
Oh,
It's kind of cool. As,
AI
like,
is
adults,
kind of
teenagers.
Cool. Yeah, it's kind of spooky, but
They're
also
kinda
kind of
hip.
cool.
Yeah.
I was on Instagram, I think yesterday. No, it was YouTube. And I was I subscribe to enough channels where like every now and then I'll pop in for like 30 minutes and catch up on the channels I follow or whatever.
Yeah.
But every now and then you gotta have a night, or you just let the algorithm take you where it goes.
Exactly.
And in the midst of doing that last night, there was an ad that it was AI generated human singing.
Huh.
Basically, you type in lyrics and then with MIDI you program melody, and it will be a air quote human singing your thing. And I was just like, who is this for?
Yeah.
Like, why? The whole thing was so creepy, and I was like, man, I really do kind of want to mess around with it.
Yeah.
But I think something out of this whole weird AI thing that we're currently working through will surface as, I think, kind of useful.
Yeah, we're in a weird transition with the metaverse and like you said, AI and trying to figure it all out.
I encountered AI generated gent metal. It's continuous. It's on YouTube. You can find it. And it's when I came across it, it said song number 3,555, something like that. And I just went into the comments and someone said, man, song number 3,543 was really good. I was like, man, how long have you been listening, first of all?
Yeah.
And,
Well, that was just the comment.
yeah, but I'm like, oh my God, what does this mean?
What does it mean? I honestly think, like, right now, the limited perspective I have on all that stuff is like, I think it really can be used as like a really cool tool to get you started.
Yes.
Like, it can be the like random shuffleizer you need to just be like, I don't feel inspired today, or I don't whatever. But like, I think there's a lot of people that are like, especially in the visual art community, that have like the AI that you can just type in a whole prompt, like SpongeBob SquarePants in like pointillism, and it'll just like generate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of people in the visual art world that is like worried about that. And I don't know, like, I don't worry about it that much, because I think it's only going to be, at least for now, it's only going to be a thing if it enhances a human being doing their work.
Yeah.
Which someone who's able to like use AI to like make great art is probably already great at art anyway. It's not going to make, like, I'm not going to be able to make better visual art because I have AI, because I'm not good at visual art.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
That's a good
also,
point.
at this point, at least, we're putting in this. I've been using Midjourney. That's the one I use for. And
Is
that's,
that a visual art one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the interesting ones are always, every single one of them, obviously, it's a human decision saying, I would like you to do David Hasselhoff, singing with Queen, hyper realistic. Like, okay, I want to see that, but that was a human that decided that thing.
Mm-hmm.
When we start getting AI that's coming up with those clever combinations, then that's going to be quite freaky. But
yeah,
we're not there yet.
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of maybe more now as like an inspirational tool.
Yeah.
If I'm an artist, I'm not really worried. Is that taking anything over? Kind of like electronic drum machines. Like, I don't think any of us are super worried.
No.
But maybe that's a good segue too. I mean, with electronic drumming and
I think there's a lot of people, like,
the whole studio scene,
yeah,
of course.
I think that there's a lot of people that thought, like, there's actually I did a podcast episode reacting to it, because I found this like Musicians Institute clinic that Jeff Porcaro did, and he was talking about, like, people were asking about click track and stuff, and this is like right around when like sessions were starting to just use click track, which was not a thing back then. And his thoughts on it were so interesting, because it definitely did lean toward click track's going to ruin music, and I think there's still people that think that.
Whoa.
But what's so interesting to me, like, the more like work I've started to do, like session work, producing stuff like that, the more I've realized, like, I still get hired sometimes to program drum parts, because producers that don't play drums can't program good drum parts.
Mm-hmm.
Or not.
You still need a human drummer.
Yeah.
Even if you're just programming it into a computer.
Totally. And that,
That's
like,
a good point.
something that I've like been super interested in, and I have no way to like prove this, but I think statistically speaking, I would say like 97% of the musicians that I just am like, I love this person, I love what they do, producer, artist, hired musician, whatever it is, like almost all of them also play drums. Like I just gravitate toward musicians that like Chick Corea, one of my favorite piano players forever, didn't know until like 10 years into liking him that he played drums.
Yeah.
Like almost all of my favorite musicians, like some of my favorite producers, I've listened to like 15, 20 albums that they've worked on across different artists. And I'm like, I love it so much. And then I find out like they're a drummer first and then producer. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. And I just think that that's why I don't think as a drummer you should be worried about drum machines taking over or worried about it's so easy to get a loop pack and put together samples and whatever. Like you should be worried if you aren't willing to get your hands dirty with that stuff. Like that's when you should start to worry. Like if you're resistant to the reality of music moving forward, like as a photographer, if AI really does take a hold and these prompt things become really popular, it's like you should only be worried as a visual artist if you just like totally resist it and want to act as if they aren't existing and no one's using them. But if you're also willing to use them, then like it's going to be, you're going to be a step ahead of everybody else that's using them because you actually have visual art skills on top of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like anyone can buy a sample pack of drums. Less people can buy a sample pack of drums and make it feel like something that pairs well with some song that
know how to actually use it musically. Yeah.
I think I think the thing that I try to like keep in mind is forever is a long time. So to say like I'm never gonna do XYZ is like a bold statement. And I'm a pretty hard-headed person, but I have lived enough life to know that like because there was a period of time where I was a full-time touring musician and I literally was like, I will never, ever not tour full-time. And now I can look back and go, that was, I have a ton of thoughts about that kind of mindset. So I feel like it's just important for me, like crypto, NFTs, however much you choose to engage with it, before you make an opinion of it, engage with it yourself and figure out what you think. Yeah. Like it's one thing to buy a sample pack, learn how to like program some beats that sound cool, that you find like inspiring and engaging or whatever, and then be like, okay, cool. I still like playing drums physically way more, and I don't really want to do this. But now you know that that's true, and now you still have whatever skills you learned from doing that thing, and you might find this one project where you go, you know what? This kind of project is actually perfect for this thing. And I've never thought I'd use this skill before, but now I'm going to do it and it's going to be great and it's going to be whatever. Like, you just really never know. And I think, like, especially going online and looking at a comment section on any place you are online, it's easy to, like, fall down the trap of, like, I'm watching this thing and I now need to decide, do I like it or do I not like it?
Oh, yeah.
And it's okay to...
It's okay not to have that answer.
It's also okay to go, I like this about it. I don't know if I like this about it. I don't really understand this about it. I hate this about it. I really like this about it. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Or I just don't know yet, right? I mean, that's totally agree.
I think that if you have, I think there's just a lot of people on planet Earth, but specifically, I'll talk about musicians who have a lot of like preconceived notions of like, you can never do X on, it's a this kind of song with this kind of tempo and blah, blah, blah. You could never play this. And it's like, never? Right. Maybe you could never play it like,
oh man,
like, you could never play it like Neil Peart, but if you like change all of the dynamics and you play it with brushes and it's got these kind of drum tones, you could play that part. Yeah. And now it's not even the same thing. It's like, there's so many musicians that are, I think, coming to the table with a lot of things and then trying to, whatever they're listening to, fit it into their things, when in reality it should be like the exact other way around.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I remember, this would have been like 8 years ago, something like that. I remember Mike Mitchell saying, it was like, he said somewhere, he's like, you should never splash on the one. I was like, you should never splash on the one? Never?
Never
you
splash?
Should
literally never splash symbol on the one? Or like crash?
I was like, okay, I get why that could sound cheesy in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
But to like make that the rule, you should never splash on the one. Like that that doesn't make sense to me. I was like,
Well, then you also
no.
kind of want to. It's like, well, what happens if I do?
Right. Well,
You know, what could
and I
that
have
lead to?
that contrary personality. If someone tells
Yeah,
me, oh, yeah,
definitely.
you can't or should not ever do that, I'm like, well, then
You're doing
by
it.
God, I'm doing it. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna do it.
Yeah. And I immediately went out and recorded a video splashing on the one. I was like, I'm going to find a place where this sounds good to my ear. And I did. Like,
Yeah.
that sounds good to me. Maybe I'm a cheeseball. I could be.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's easier to think that there is one correct answer. That's what our brains want. Our brains want simplicity, and we want to categorize things.
Right.
And it's easy to try and force that into a lot of situations. But
It actually helps you. It can help you navigate life, having a little bit of rigidity.
yeah. But I think is like if you really want to be creative, like this is something that I just saw a Mark Juliana clinic. He was in town last week. At
Bummer
Nelson.
we missed it.
Yeah,
We were here doing this.
It was amazing.
Yep.
It was really amazing. And these are thoughts that I've been trying to piece together myself for some of my students, and hearing him talk about it, I was like, yeah, okay. There's other people out there trying to like articulate this. People were talking about like, how do you play from a flow state, or how do you sound great, or, you know, how do you sound like yourself or be musical and have your own voice and stuff like that. And one of the things that he was saying is like, don't show up with anything, because that's inherently not in the moment. And the only things that feel like kinetic and engaging and like they do that like magical thing that we want are things that like are purely in the moment. Someone is truly invested in everything that's happening. And that like really resonates with me, because one of the things that I've talked about like with my students is like, I feel like a lot of drummers like get their paradiddles together in their exercise 10 through 70 in like stick control or whatever.
Yeah.
And they sit down at the drums and they go, I'm going to play this groove from this book and this fill from this thing and blah, 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 blah. And like,
Right.
none of that is like music.
Right.
Because to me, the first thing I'm going to do is sit down at a drum set and figure out like, what is this? Like, there's a drum set to my right over here. I've never seen those drums in this room with those cymbals ever.
Right.
I don't know what that drum set sounds like. I especially don't know what it sounds like in this room. Especially don't know how this room reacts to like a soft hit snare versus a rim shot snare versus like a cranking, like super hard. I don't know what any of that sounds like in this room. So there's no way by looking at a drum set to know like what would be appropriate to play, because you don't have any information yet. And it's not until you hit the kick drum once that you're able to, depending on your experience, be able to go like, ooh, okay, like it's a boomy kick drum, so now I want to play it like this, and blah, 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 blah. And like, oh, okay, this snare drum is really dead, so now I have all these options, and this stuff may not sound as good because it's not like, but all of that happens after you hit the drums. None of it happens before you hit the drums.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't ever consider that at all, and essentially treat every drum set as if it's a practice pad of like, it has rebound, I'm going to do my thing. And it's like, no one you love that has like touched you and brought a tear to your eye. I don't think there's anyone that's ever done that. It elicited that from someone that like brought that much baggage to an instrument and then just sat down and like unloaded it on it. It's like, that's probably not how that worked.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
Except for maybe Buddy Rich.
Well, yeah. If Buddy brought a tear to anyone's eye, I think it was probably through things that he said.
Those bus
The band
tapes.
members, probably.
Yeah. That's interesting. Just to go back to Mark, because I heard that he started that clinic with a rant. That's what Kip was saying on our last podcast.
Oh, did you guys just have Kip on? I sat right next to him at the thing.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, he was
He's great.
He goes, it was great. He came out and he started by ranting, and he was like, oh, okay, yeah, and just jumped into it. I'm like, that. What is more in the moment than that? That's like, I don't. There's no agenda. It's
Getting
just
a feel for the room like that,
just
the people.
coming out and this is what I'm thinking about in this second. Oh yeah, drums. Right, drums. Okay, great. That's like, oh, today I'm going to play for you this. I'm like, that's 100% right.
And he's probably
That's not
so
music.
much more relaxed too.
Yeah.
Just getting to know the audience more, and as you said, like what's actually in this room. How does it feel?
Yeah, well, this is what I'm thinking and feeling right now. Oh, and also I'm gonna say some stuff on the drums. Let's see what they have to say with me. That's interesting. So, what do you do in a case? So I play with this metal band called Crusade, and I do have some room for improvisation, but the things are they're so locked in tight, but we're playing a variety of different rooms. Rooms have different sounds. Like how do you adjust for that? It's not, because even like when you're supposed to play something that's not, again, there's some room for improvisation, but there's a lot of like, these are the parts. You play this here.
Yeah, sometimes I think I personally have always approached everything with like, I'll learn what like if an artist is hiring me to like play a 70-minute show or whatever, I'm going to learn those songs so that whatever I show up to play is going to be true to like the thing that they're expecting it to be. But I am going to find every moment I can to infuse myself into it. So that's most likely like a lot of the fills. Like sometimes there are like really signature fills that like In the Air Tonight, it's got to be that fill. I played Jack and Diane with the band for a long time and like never actually learned that one huge drum fill that happens in the middle.
The solo.
And which is stupid. I should have, because now I watch footage back and I'm like, damn, that is stupid. I really should have like learned Kenny Aronoff's deal.
Yeah, you kind of have to play that part.
Yeah, so I haven't. I've sometimes erred on the wrong side, but hey, no one that was paying me to be there ever had a problem with it. So they had a lot of other problems. Like my first show, they were like, you only have one crash cymbal. You gotta have two crash cymbals. And they were like, I don't feel like you're hitting the downbeat enough. And I really don't love, like, I don't really feel like most people want me to play like big crash cymbals on downbeats like more. It's just not really like a thing.
Just splashes, right?
Only splashes on downbeats. For sure. Not crash cymbals.
Yep.
Crash cymbals are for the ands, the e's, the uhs. The splash cymbals are for the downbeat. No, I don't like crash cymbals. A lot of the music I listen to, like pop music, does not have like downbeat crash cymbal going on. So I just like try to do it in other ways. Like I would rather like very intensely like build up. Like I was just listening to a Taylor Swift song on the way over, and like there was like a moment before the second verse where like there's all this swelling, there's a ton of reverb on the vocals, and then it like sucks up really small and gets really dry for the rest of the verse. And I was like, that's a way to like create the effect of a crash cymbal by taking things away.
Yeah, totally.
Or going from a washy thing to a tight thing, and you don't need a crash cymbal. Yeah. In that instance, for me. So when I was touring with that band, they were like, "You got to hit more crash cymbals." And I was like, "Okay." But it was like little stuff like that where I was like, weird. And it was like, honestly, it was just mostly like an age thing where the guitar player, who was like kind of the person that would always give me notes, he was, probably 13 or 14 years older than me. And he's just coming from a different generation of music where he's like, this is what I want. But anyway, to get back to your question, I feel like I'm always looking for how much can I infuse myself in it and not get in trouble, which means I'm finding moments on an outro that like I can really just like go off or whatever. And then in the rest of it, it really is just like, you can still play the same thing every night, but be present while doing it. And the way that I do that is like take each moment, each backbeat, each kick drum, and try to be like as intentional and consistent with it as possible. Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of, that's something that like really revealed itself to me when in college, I played a lot on like Lower Broadway, and I was doing the the first 4-hour gig I ever did. I was like, this is the craziest thing a human being could ever do. Yep. And at the time I was playing with, this was before I was with Vic Firth, so I was playing Vader sticks, and they had unfinished sticks. They were called like nude sticks or something.
Yeah, I remember those.
I brought those to the first, and my hands were, just absolutely wrecked. It was it was insane. But what I realized there is like, at some point you have to like embrace, it's kind of like running or something. Like you can't really think about like mile 3 when you're on the first half mile. Right. You really have to just be like,
be present.
Yeah. 0.53 mile, 0.54 mile, and be present, be thinking about like, how's my breathing? How do my knees feel? How does this all work? And just kind of try to lock into like what's happening now. And I think that a lot of drummers, maybe they're nervous, so they're thinking ahead to like the bridge because they're like, how does the transition of the bridge go? Yeah. Or they're like,
I don't want to mess that fill up.
Yeah, I don't want to mess that fill up. Or they're like, I'm bored. Like, this song is slow. Like I like the next tune on the set list is like faster. I can't wait for Don't do that. Like try to really be respect every note that you're playing. It's like what they always say about like every gig is the most important gig, or like treat every show like it's your last or whatever.
Yep.
You can apply that same logic to like every note you're playing. It's like every ghost note you're playing, like
Love that.
Yeah.
approach it this like I was just listening to Steph Curry talk about some of his like workouts and stuff, and he's just like he's obsessed with the details of stuff. He doesn't just put up, he doesn't just put up 1,000 shots. He tries to track not just did I make the shot or did I miss the shot. He tries to track what part of the rim did it hit as it went in. Was it on the back rim? Was it on the front rim? Was it what?
Yeah.
Like the more granular you get with all those little details, the more present and aware and like focus you're putting on that stuff. When you go to play in front of an entire arena, of course it looks easier for him to do it. He's thought about it 4 or 5 times deeper than most of the people that are doing it.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
what that's why he can add in the distraction of like fans like calling you terrible names and like not getting the calls that you want from the refs, and like your teammate punched another teammate in the face at practice the other day and like whatever. He can handle all of that stuff as distractions because he's working on a focus level that's like when there's none of that, he's working 20 times deeper than like most people are.
Yes.
At it. And like I think you can apply the same thing to drums.
Yeah.
You absolutely can.
100%.
Where were you watching this? Because I watched at least part of his masterclass.
Oh, it wasn't his masterclass. He was talking about it, which I really want to see. I haven't done any of the masterclass stuff. But.
For sure, check it out, man. Well, it was very enlightening to me because his whole thing has been he has revolved his technique around when he receives the ball, he receives it from a shooting position. He goes, and so in other words, he's never reaching for the ball. He catches the ball always from a position that he can, the moment it touches his hands, he can shoot.
Yeah.
Like that's, when I heard that was insane to me. And then he starts showing game footage. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Everything is, never, ever, never reaches for it.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can't do it, I won't catch it. He makes sure that the second it touches his hands, he's able to shoot. It's beautiful.
And that makes sense. Like you would never, it doesn't make sense. There's obviously a lot of people that haven't thought about it like that.
Right.
But what he's talking about to him probably seems like the equivalent of like, well, on a gig, you would never hit your snare drum and then drop your arm to the side every single time you play your snare.
Right.
You hit the snare drum and then you prepare for wherever you need to be to like hit the snare drum again. And it's like most things in life can be thought about like that. And to me, there's like a beauty and like just an endless amount of like things to discover in that kind of thinking about stuff that I feel like, I don't know. I think some people like for the first time in a really long time, I have a really young student right now. I have a student that's, I think he's like 15. And it's been interesting to watch him because this is like, I haven't taught a beginner at drums in a really long time. And he is like 3 lessons in and is sounding really good, but he gets frustrated almost instantly when something doesn't work. And what it's reminded me is like how obsessed you kind of have to be of like, again, it's like, don't get frustrated about how that went. Focus on the next one and trying to make whatever adjustments required to make the next one a little bit better than the one that just happened before it.
Yep.
And that's not a thing that you have to assign like value judgment to, or was it good or was it bad or was it whatever. It's just like what I wanted to do was this, and here's how it differed slightly from what I intended. So can I make it what I intended? And that's really what anyone like wants. Like when you're playing a show, you want to be able to, whatever you want to do to respond to what's happening around you, you want to be able to just like do it. And that's what we're trying to prepare to do.
Yeah.
Do you-
the subconscious that we've talked about.
Do you meditate?
I don't.
Yeah. It was just a very meditative concept.
I
Totally.
I resonate a lot with like meditation, mindfulness. Like I read Being Aware of Being Aware. I think it's the name of the book. It sounds gimmicky. It's great. And a lot of it talks about like mindfulness and how like kind of the point of that book is he talks about how when you start learning about mindfulness, there's a lot of people that are like, here's what you got to do when you meditate. There's all these things. And like, you got to do all these things to get to a place where you're like not thinking about anything and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He's like, it's kind of the exact opposite. Like
Yes.
at all times, all like everything you're physically experiencing that is happening to you, the only things that make up our experience are our thoughts and what happens outside of our body. And he's like, those two things are happening, but there's something observing those two things.
Yes.
And what that is awareness, and it's always there. Like it never ages. It like just is there.
Yes.
And it's always there. So you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops to become aware. Like you are just aware. You just have to realize that you are aware.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and taking away those, like you said, taking away the value judgments. That is the barrier to entry for a lot of people with meditation, because they go, well, I just can't clear my thoughts. I'm like, man, whoever told you that good meditation was you clearing your mind so there are no thoughts that's like, to me, that's woo-woo bullshit.
Yeah.
Like,
It's irresponsible.
I'm like, it's irresponsible.
So
I'm
do
like,
you also meditate?
I've been getting into it more. I don't really have a practice, but
Okay.
I listen to maybe somebody like I really respect a lot of the mindfulness and
Yeah.
wellness, advice podcasts out there. I love all these concepts, especially like the kind of bringing it back to beginning drummers and like being prepared. Because I've been reading this book, The Power of Habit, and it talks about Michael Phelps, and especially there's a lot of tie-ins with athletes and drumming. I think there's good reason for that. A lot of the same tactics and strategies I think apply for success.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
But they talk about, Michael Phelps, obviously, of the Olympian that he is, but he, like his high school coach would just drill into him like just a crazy amount of prep and like seeing the water, seeing the lanes, seeing the strokes, make him watch videotapes of him during practice, like while he was asleep, like, basically tell him like dream of this thing, right?
Wow.
Over and over and over. And just be like hyper aware, hyper prepared. And then I think it was one of the Olympics where he actually set the world record. His goggles had blurred up. And again, similar to bringing it back to like Steph Curry, like those distractions, like his wall was so high that those things didn't touch him.
Yeah.
He had actually like prepared for that exact thing. And so he was able to like literally not panic and actually visualize how many strokes he had left to hit the wall.
Wow.
He literally couldn't see. What a scary concept that is, right?
I mean, and that's
he literally won.
It makes sense. I mean, the parallel between that and Steph Curry is like the reason Steph Curry can put up shots with the defender in his face is because like he doesn't see the defender. He's still taking the shot that he's envisioned himself shoot a billion times.
right.
And I have also read that, and I think the stuff with Michael Phelps is like really fascinating. Because like part of what he talks about is like preparing for a race. He like listens to the same music, has like adjusts his goggles or cap all like the same way every single time. And it reminds me of a couple of years ago, I was at a Benny Greb clinic and someone asked him like, what does he do to warm up?
Was that the one at Rocket Town?
Yeah.
God, I'm so sad I missed that.
I know. See, these are like the two drum clinics I've seen in the last like 10 years. And I feel like I'm always the one that's like, damn, I really wish I could have been at that. Like when Dave Weckl did a clinic a couple years ago, I was like, Dave Weckl did a clinic? Why was I not told about this? But Benny said, like someone asked him, like, what do you do to warm up? And this is very similar to stuff that I've done, specifically like when I'm playing a show. I'd never heard anyone articulate, because most people, when they're like, what do you do to warm up? They're like, well, I got my practice pad 20 minutes before and I'm doing my paradiddles. And that's cool. Like there's a physical component of getting ready to play that, depending on the kind of music you play and the environments you play in, that can be really important. But then he was like, well, what I do is I try to, get quiet for a little bit, and I try to envision where I'm about to play and think through like what it'd be like to walk on stage and sit down and the thing I'm going to play first, and like just essentially doing the Michael Phelps thing of like, what's it going to look like? Envision what a successful engagement will be from wherever you're sitting in the green room right now to playing the show. And I think that is something, especially like a lot of the stuff that I do touring wise now is like, I'll come in and do like a run of 3 shows subbing for someone. And like the last one I did, like we flew in, I'd never met anyone in the band. We played 70 minutes. It had tracks. It had Ableton. It had the whole thing. And it's like you sit down, you play the 70 minutes the first time in a city that you've never been to, with people you've never met, with a drum set you've never seen.
Yeah.
And it's like, to do that successfully, I need to be able to walk through what the scenario is like what's it going to be like to walk out, like where's the laptop going to be, like when I press spacebar, what happens in the laptop? Oh yeah, there's like a little intro track. I'm going to be behind the drums when it happens, and then I'm going to sit down. The rest of the band's going to walk out. I'm going to hear that part of the song that makes me know that we have 4 bars before we get, like walking through all of that. Like it seems goofy, or it seems
Too much,
like
maybe.
that's a lot, or oh, bro, you hit spacebar and like it has the count in and whatever. And it's like, but what if it doesn't?
I'm
What
similar to you
else
in that,
should
yeah.
be, it's like, what else should you be aware of so that if it doesn't, like, how have they mapped the Ableton session to know like what's muted, what's not muted? Like, have you double checked all of that? Like, again, like the more prepared, the more detailed you can be, the more like you've thought through the levels of however deep you want to go. Like the more people can throw at you before you start to feel imbalanced. It's like a
It's like
weight
you're walking on a
training or something.
tightrope.
Yeah. It's like the more you can walk through all that stuff, it's like, yeah, it seems goofy. But then like I've played festivals for like thousands of people while the ears are cutting in and out. And like there's one dude on stage. It was literally the last song we played because it started pouring rain. It was like clear skies when we got up there. We're on our like fourth song. We're counting off our fourth song. And literally it was like over the last 2 minutes of the last song, it was like, oh, it is about to get real. So like there were probably like 8,000 people watching us as we started playing. And then like when it started raining, there were like 1,000 people watching. Like people just bailed.
They bolted, yeah.
So we're playing and like this song that we were playing, the producer was there and he didn't have ears, but he played bass. So like we were like, let's bring him up. He'll play bass. It'll be cool. So like, we start playing. So I'm already, no matter what, we are all on ears and there's no wedges on stage. So I knew I was already going to have to like help him through because we have tracks and the whole thing. So I was like, I'm really going to have to make sure that me and Phil are watching each other and I'm helping him know what's going on. And then it's starting to rain and it's like, oh God. And now I'm like, my computer might be getting wet. My SPD might be getting wet. Phil doesn't have ears. And then the harder it's raining, like we have RF interference and like ears are literally zapping out for like a measure and a half and then coming back and then whatever. So like the whole thing was just like
it's falling apart.
Yeah, but it's weird. I was like so present for it and so committed to let's just fucking do it. Like it's all happening. Let's do it. And I really just locked in. It's like those goofy exercises where you're like, I used to in college like practice where like it would play 2 measures of click and then it would drop out for like 8 measures.
Yeah.
And you try to,
gap click, baby.
Yeah, gap click. All the little games of like playing with the metronome on the E or whatever. Like all of that stuff is like fun and games and it's like cool and it does help your internal time. But like there's also like, again, you don't have to do any of that to like go play a show for sure. So it's not like you need those skills, but if you're willing to like go there will be moments where it pops up.
It's going to serve you so well.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like being overly prepared is just, it's not because like, I'm sure the drum parts weren't challenging. It's not like you couldn't play. It's not like you couldn't run an Ableton. Right. It's to prepare you for when things go awry.
Right.
Then you're calm.
Yeah.
It's like when the defender's in Steph's face, he just does his thing.
Yeah.
He's not shaken by it.
Yeah. He's planned for that exact thing to happen and practiced exactly what he would do. Okay, great. That's option 5 of the things that I figured would occur during this game. And I've practiced this
I love that.
10 billion times. So sweet.
So the moral here is practice a lot.
Yeah.
And not just rudiments, like practice. I don't know about you guys, but for me, like before a show, I actually will visualize. I'll listen to the song and just close my eyes and actually just play the parts. Just like feel how it's going to feel.
Yeah.
Me visualizing the kit in the venue, what that's going to be like, am I close to the bar? Or am I going to know? Am I going to have friends and family there? Because that's a whole nother thing that can mess you up,
Sure.
All those things, all the non-drumming things.
Yeah.
Imagine, I think it's good to imagine somebody that you would be nervous to play in front of coming in. Like
mid-song.
How would I respond if so-and-so walked in the room? I don't want to be like, oh, shit. That's my adrenaline just spiked and I am not prepared for this. I want to be like, oh, cool. I foresaw that as a possibility. And you can kind of insert anybody like that. There's probably like at least 100 people where if they walked in the room, I would recognize them and be like, well, holy shit. That's really something. I'm like, I'll just put any one of those people in that slot in my brain and you can do that exact thing. And and when somebody like that walks in, you go, right on. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is from Jojo Mayer. Yeah. I don't want to think about my wings when I'm flying.
Wow.
Or when I fly, I think that's
like
what
that.
it is.
That's such a JoJo thing to say.
Kind of summarize what we're talking about. Just like being so prepared that you're not thinking about the thing. Like when you're running, you're not thinking about the individual steps necessarily or the next few miles. You know, it's like you're just so ready for it. And you're just natural, comfortable.
Well, I know I've used this example before, so forgive me, but it's I always go to that Tony Robbins story where he was coaching Andre Agassi. This was post Andre being at the top of the tennis game, where he was bombing for a while, and he was like, "Yeah, there's a problem with my backswing, so I've been really focusing on that." And Tony was like, "Yeah, that's great. That's great. So when you were number one, were you thinking about your backswing?" "No." Like, cool. So why are you thinking about it right now?
Yeah.
Like, do you really think that it's like it needs to improve, that you lost some ability there, or do you think that maybe it's a mindset thing? Oh shit.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about my backswing because maybe he missed and he got in his own head about it. And then as soon as he got out of his own head, he started winning again. Like that's you can start thinking about your wings when you're flying. You're like, oh man, yeah, my feathers they feel weird.
Yeah.
And I don't think about those.
Now I'm picturing you as a bird. That was good.
Easy to picture me as a bird.
That hair, yeah.
It's like when you have like a really full cup of coffee, you're trying to walk to the next room. Like generally thinking the thought, oh man, I really should not spill this right now, usually doesn't lead to 100% success rate of not spilling it. Usually it just makes you, that all makes me think, I've told this story a bunch in like different places, but I had the honor of studying with Chester Thompson when I was in college, and he's like the best. Yeah. And
you're a Belmont grad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he was there when I was there, and I was studying with him, and he just makes you do all kinds of weird stuff. Like the first thing he does in seminar, like you're a freshman, you just moved to Nashville, you're going to school, you're in drum seminar, which is just all the drum set majors are in one room. So it's like 50, 60 drummers in a room, which is intimidating in and of itself.
No personality, it doesn't sound like, right?
It's just like, that's already a thing, but you're a freshman, you're new on campus, you didn't even know where the building was until you got there. Yeah. And then you're sitting there and like now you're aware that like all the freshmen are in the front and all the cool seniors are in the back, like goofing off. And like it's this whole dynamic where you're just like, Jesus, this is terrible. I hate this. And then Chester's like, all right, welcome everyone. First day, this is what we're going to do. All the freshmen are going to get up and we're going to totally flip around the entire drum set to a left-hand drum set. And you're going to play.
That's what Kip said too.
He makes you play a basic rock beat and then a basic jazz beat. But the basic rock beat, you have to end with a crash cymbal and a kick drum on one or whatever.
Yeah.
Awesome. So he was always having people do that. And like in our lessons, he would just have you do real weird, like crazy coordination things. And he would always then make you learn it right-hand lead and then left-hand lead. And I remember there was a week where I was trying to play this, I practiced a lot and like it always felt good in the practice room. And then I'd get in lessons and I just sounded like absolute, like people falling downstairs. Like it sounded like nothing. And I can remember one lesson I was just getting frustrated and I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like I did practice and he was just like thinking too much.
Yes.
Stop thinking. And I was like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like the feet are doing this and the hands. And he's like, stop thinking, just listen. Because what I didn't know at that point is like, I've practiced it enough. Like I do know what it's supposed to sound like. And if I literally just start listening to what's happening, depending on my preparedness, like it is possible for my brain to correct what I can't like, because like there's a lot of things happening very fast when you're playing drums.
Yes.
And like, there are times when like thinking about what should change and what needs to change will help. And there are times where like your ears and your brain will just kind of route around the like prefrontal cortex and just kind of like make it happen if you'll let it happen.
Yes.
And like there were then moments after that, like I can remember I was playing a concert and I had this solo and like, I was nervous and, during rehearsal, I'd always be thinking like, man, when I was practicing, like this thing worked and this thing, so I'm going to make sure I get those things in there or whatever. Then during the concert, I can remember there was a point in like halfway through my solo where I just had this moment of like, oh, I'm playing the solo. Like, and up until that point, I hadn't thought about like solo's coming up. Like we're going to play the solo. Like, let's make sure we play some cool stuff. Like, ooh, it's just like really me realizing I was fully present, which then at that point breaks you being fully present. But like still, it was this thing on stage where I have a really visceral memory of like the concert and having the thought halfway through a solo of like, oh yeah, it's all just kind of happening if I let it. But there's a lot of ways to not let it.
What's that you said? You want to learn how to play drums, but you don't know where to begin? Let me humbly suggest to you that you head on down to Music Lab Nashville and you talk to their crew of fantastic teachers, and you jump on in and start your music journey right there. Don't want to learn drums? Want to learn guitar, ukulele, mandolin, trumpet, vocals, keys, sitar? Maybe not sitar, but all the other stuff for sure. Visit nashville.musiclab.co to learn more and sign up for a free trial lesson.
I mean, the biggest compliment I ever get, and every time it happens, I'm like, man, amazing. Is someone that's like, man, I love it. Like you look so relaxed. Or like, man, you look so like carefree up there. Like, or like, man, it sounds so effortless. It's like, thank you. That's the only thing that I could have wanted someone to say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
I like it.
As a segue into another quote from Aaron Sterling, which is, Tim is the transcription master of our time. Grab that from your website. So I figured that might be a good compliment too, right? That'd be up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, people definitely know you, and you're very well respected in the drumming community for.
I'll do a Nosh more. Yeah, why not?
Oh yeah, so a little bourbon break.
Yes, the drumming community, absolutely.
Yeah, they know you as they should for a lot of different reasons, but specifically transcriptions. I want to go into, where that started and kind of your mindset on, because you're not transcribing simple grooves. I mean, you can, but for those unfamiliar, we'll link to some of those videos, but some of the Zildjian live videos and drum solos that are very, very involved. And you've actually transcribed some of my work too. So thank you.
Yeah. So like, I guess I'll, as brief as I can, go through my whole spiel with transcriptions. So I couldn't, up until like halfway through college, I couldn't super read music. I was getting my ass kicked in auditions because I really couldn't read like big band charts, and because big band charts require you to like interpret notation and fill around figures, and I really couldn't do that. And then I just had like a basic understanding of eighth notes and quarter notes and whatever, because when I started playing, I just taught myself. And by the time I started taking lessons, my playing was so far ahead of reading. I was just kind of like, I'm just not going to be a reader because it just doesn't seem like it's going to be worth backtracking that far to try and catch that up. Yeah. But when I got to college, about halfway through is when I really started to realize like my inability to read music well is now keeping me from, like, if you want to learn 40 songs in 48 hours, your charting ability really will be what determines whether you can do that or not.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. And then there was also like halfway through college is really when I started getting into a bunch of drummers that like, there just wasn't a ton of like people on YouTube being like, here's a lesson breaking down this person's fill or this person's fill or whatever. So I was like, okay, I think I'm just going to have to sit down and try and figure out what they're doing. So that started in college. And then I just very slowly, like, it was a skill that I just really got passionate about, like the fun puzzle of like sitting down and trying to work out, like, what was it? And then like trying to write it in Finale and then hitting play in Finale and being like, oh shit, that's not it. For sure, that's not it.
I have the same kind of.
Yeah.
So
that's how that's literally the whole workflow.
There's a solution. It's like your job to figure it out.
Yeah. It's your job to figure it out. Like,
this is a thing.
Yeah.
What is it?
Totally.
Sometimes there's more than one answer too.
The interpretation is a big part of transcription.
Or how you notate it. But yeah.
Yeah, which is definitely something that I have learned firsthand in some of those VF Jams things. But But yeah, so I just started doing it a bunch in college, and then like I would upload them to my website, just like, I don't know, I thought it was fun, like I'll put it here, like whatever. And then like after I graduated, I'd be on the road and I'd just like be in the back of the bus working on a transcription because I was like, I can't really practice. Like this is a way to like still be nerdy about drums, whatever. And then just posting them on my website enough to where a couple people would reach out and be like, hey, like I downloaded this from your website, but like have you ever transcribed this or blah, blah, blah. And then like found a couple of like really like niche nerdy people that would just always kind of like every couple of weeks or every couple of months come back and be like, hey man, really want you to transcribe. Hey man, really love you to transcribe this.
Me.
Man, yeah. So
then
like,
of course the brand started. Is that probably what propelled you to that next level of attention, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the more people started finding stuff, the more I realized like, oh, there's like really like a thing here for this. And then in doing that, I was just kind of accumulating all this. Like some of them I was like passionate and transcribed it because I loved it. Someone was just like someone saw some video that was like going viral and they like wanted it done. But I was like, man, I'm kind of like stockpiling all this stuff. And when I signed with Vic Firth, I just kind of mentioned to them like, hey, by the way, like I transcribe and like I've done some transcriptions of like, you know, whoever they had on their roster. And I was like, if that would ever be like beneficial for you guys, like let me know. And like they just were like, that's cool.
Yeah, they probably didn't realize it yet.
They literally were like, yeah, that's cool.
Like they couldn't foresee how that could be a thing.
Yeah. And then you know, some time went by and I'd be like, oh, by the way, like I just transcribed like this transcription and blah, blah, blah. Like it's a really cool video. Like if you guys want me to like edit a video together or like you guys want to use it, like feel free or whatever. And they'd be like, yeah, that's thanks for sending it. But like, I don't know, but cool. Like, thanks for sending it.
Yeah.
And then when the VF Jams project came around, that's when Mark reached out to me and was like, hey, kind of have this idea of like, we got all these cool performances and like, what if we transcribe like a couple bars from like one of them? And then that just turned into like, what if we transcribe every single moment of all of them? And
you're like, shit, what have I done?
Yeah. And I cannot express how thankful I am for that project because it, like Vinny Greb just released a course that I did a bunch of transcriptions for. And like, I've gotten to work with like Steve Smith, who I grew up loving. And like,
it's insane.
There's just like so many people I've gotten to work with, like Aaron Sterling and Aaron Spears and like all these people that like, and again, this is like an idea I had, like just from like if you want to do music as a living, there's like definitely going to be a lot of moments where like you hear no a lot. And like, that isn't necessarily like a no, you're bad at this or no, you're wrong for this, but it can just be like not right now, which a lot of people have said that's not an original thought. But like with like the Aaron Sterling book, I reached out to him and was like, hey man, I want to do this book. Do you want to do it? And he was like, I don't know, man. Like transcriptions are my thing. Like it seems like you got a cool thing going, but I don't know. And then I did some VF Jams stuff, did a book with Aaron Spears, and then came back to him and I was like, hey man, I've done these projects now and I did this book with this guy and like I really think like, you know, this is what it could look like. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And for him, it wasn't like, he really just like doesn't do transcription thing at all. So for him, he literally was just like, I don't even know what this would look like. Yeah. But then once he could see what it would look like, he could see that there were people interested. He was like, oh yeah. And I think that,
sometimes that's all it takes, just for people, for brands, for individuals, just to see that vision. Totally, you know, because it's otherwise it's just an abstract idea.
Yeah,
you know, they can't see the benefit.
Yeah, it can be hard to hear no a lot, but for me, some of the stuff that I've like worked the hardest at is the stuff that I just like, and like pursuing that stuff. It's the same with like now with like all the studio stuff I'm doing. Like I started doing it because someone was like, hey man, you got some mics. Like, could you record a drum thing for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then the more that I got into it, the more I was like, just kind of became obsessed with like, just how deep you can go with all of it. And not even like gear and all that stuff. Like just how many choices you get to make when you put drums on a song, or when you, like we were talking about earlier, when you program drums on a song. Yeah. Like, you get to make so many decisions, and there are so many levels of it. And there are so many, for me, the thing that I'm like fallen in love with is like, there's so many ways you can infuse yourself on it to where someone will be able to listen to just your like, they'll be able to know it's your stomp clap on 1 and 2 and not someone else's, just by the way that like, whether it's exactly where it's placed or the kind of sounds you picked or how you treated those sounds, they're able to go like, that's why we're all able to listen to pretty much any Aaron Sterling video and be able to be like, it's Aaron.
It's Aaron. Yep.
That's why we're able to listen to like Jeff Picard and be like, it's Jeff Picard. It's because like everything they do, they're putting them in it, whether it's the whole groove or whether it's literally just like, I want this kick drum to be perfect for this song. Here's what I think that means.
Yep.
Like there's so many ways that you can do that when you're recording a song, and I just have gotten obsessed with it.
Yeah. It's cool. I feel like everything that we're talking about is connected, right? Because it seems like the transcriptions is almost like the reversal of this process of all that detail, all that preparation of the parts, whether it's the VF Live or just a drum groove or a drum solo and all that work. And then the thrill for you, and I shared this as well, as I really, I enjoy doing transcriptions of just my stuff.
Yeah.
But then to kind of unpack it and see what actually that detail would look like, see it on paper. I think that's what sets your transcriptions apart as well. Just like you make it very accessible. Because how many other drummers can transcribe, right? We see that all the time. But you transcribe things that people wouldn't even think of doing, right? Like drum solos.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to become like so known for the transcription thing. And it's been interesting to like develop ebooks and products that are like about transcriptions of people, because I think that there's a lot of people, like the phenomenon I noticed when I started selling transcription books is like there's a lot of people that just like collect transcription books.
Yes.
And that's like, that's no judgment. Like I thank God for them. Like they're how I make a living, or at least part of it.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting is like my intention when I started transcribing in college was never like, I want to transcribe this 7-minute song and I want to learn note for note this 7-minute song. What I wanted to do is I wanted to transcribe this one Calvin Rogers fill and then figure out.
I bet I can guess the one.
It's all of them.
Okay.
It really is all of them.
Yeah.
Like for real. I've transcribed like every Calvin Rogers fill you can think of.
Yeah.
God, I love his drumming. He is perfect. But so like I love his drumming so much, and like I would transcribe one fill, and then my intention with that one fill was like, let me learn exactly what that fill is, and then let me play with it long enough, mess around with it long enough, work on variations long enough to like make it a thing that I can call my own. And I think what a lot of people are doing with transcribing now is like, it's so fun that like you can go to my website right now and download literally, it's like all the VF Jams and Zildjian Live stuff. It's like 130 pages of like notation.
Yeah.
Like you can download that for free right now. And it's going to be so cool that you have 10 lifetimes of like drum stuff you can work through. But like what would be more valuable is you yourself transcribing one drum fill and then spending the next 6 months working through different ways that you can permutate and like flip on its head this one drum fill.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
and spoiler alert, that's what the dudes that you really like probably did in some form or another.
absolutely, like that just like I ended up talking to Mark Giuliano about that a good bit, and like yeah, it was interesting to hear his take on it, because he was essentially like he was almost like, yeah man, I don't think, these are not his words, but the sentiment was kind of like, yeah, no one should like literally transcribe anything. Right. What you should do is like observe someone doing something. And this is actually like when I was like 12, this is what I would do with Dennis Chambers. I would watch Dennis Chambers and go, that was cool. Why was that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. It was a lot of like tom stuff really fast. But it wasn't just tom stuff really fast. It started on the snare, then it went to the rack tom, and then it was on the floor tom, and then it came back around. So that's kind of cool. How did he do it? I wouldn't literally transcribe what he was playing, but I would try to like unpack the larger concept of like specifically what I found cool about that moment. And then I would work from there and I would figure out my own thing. And like, I think you can arrive at that same thing from a literal transcription of something. You just have to like have a process of working it from the exact thing that someone else played. Run it through all your filters to turn it into. It's no different than manipulating a sample from a sample pack, though. There's a lot of songs that I work on for people now that I send out, and they might be like, I have samples that kind of sound like that, but I don't know what sample pack this one came from. Because I'm hoping that by the time, even if it's like adding just a touch of reverb on a sample to blend it into the track that I'm working on, and then also just adding a little bit of saturation so it carves off a little bit. It's like doing just enough that it takes it from the stock thing that someone downloads from Splice or from That Sound or whatever, where once it reaches through my brain and I send it to someone else, they go like, oh, that sounds like Tim.
Yeah.
And like, it's the same with working with samples, or it's the same with taking a paradiddle diddle that Calvin Rogers played and
Totally
working through it yourself. Like you can work on similar mechanisms that like assure that like you are always sounding like you.
Yeah. So it's helpful to see that blueprint, and that's what you provided. That's what the transcriptions are useful for.
Totally.
Let me see what is actually here.
Yeah.
But then it's up to each individual to have a process to extrapolate and make it their own.
And I've tried with with my Aaron Spears and Aaron Sterling transcription books, I've tried to make sure that I include it's kind of like a video masterclass of like, here's like 6 categories you can look at and glean like bigger, more valuable, like overarching themes of these, and how you can then take that knowledge and work through some of this stuff yourself. Because at some point I started feeling really weird about just being like, buy these little black dots on this page and then feel better about your drumming. And I don't think that's like, I want to make sure that there's at least some kind of, like you said, like blueprint of like, here's a jumping off point of how you can take what's in here with these ideas and start to like bend them and twist them into like your own thing.
So you kind of get a meta understanding of that player's playing, more so than even just understanding what notes they played.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah. And I've learned so much from transcribing those drummers, because like at some point you start here, especially like if you're working on a whole book of a drummer, like at some point you're no longer, because everybody has like their tricks. A lot of the tunes you're playing are like kind of like for the verse of the song, it's like 16 bars of almost the same thing. So then you start hearing past that and you start going like, man, every time they play like this kind of fill, they actually started with their left hand. Kind of weird. Why? And you go like, oh, well, it preserves the like rim shot backbeat better like that. Oh, okay. That's kind of interesting. Like it's little stuff like that you then start going like, now I'm not just learning an abstract sticking that I should learn because that's how they did it. I'm now learning a sticking that's rooted in like a principle of like, when I play this fill, I want to preserve the backbeat. So I started with 2 right hands, and then that next sticking is the left hand because now the backbeat is like with the left hand, and that's the one that's more used to the backbeat. And it's like, okay, there you go. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Now I don't have to memorize a sticking because now it just naturally makes sense because I know why they did it.
Yeah.
Yep. That's all in there, man. Like that's all there for the taking. But again, you have to think past just like the right, left, left. Like all of that stuff is worthless if you're not trying to apply something bigger to it.
It's almost like the sticking it just happens to be what they ended up using for, like you said, for that principle that in a bigger context is more important.
Yeah.
For the song.
Totally. I mean, a better question is always why, not what.
I like that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that a lot of drum and I'm certainly guilty of putting out a YouTube video or 2 of this, but like what matters so much less than why. And it's like, if you know the why, sometimes you can even guess what the what is without knowing it because you know why. Like if you say like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you know, if someone describes to you a play that Steph Curry did and you go like, well, it was this and this and this and this. And then he finished going left. Oh, is that because the screen was here and not here? Like whatever. It's like sometimes you can, if you understand the why of decision making, then you can, it's like so many people are like, here's how you tune your snare drum for rock and roll. And it's like, what? Hey, tune your snare drum for rock and roll? That's been done in infinite amount of ways. What are you talking about? Right. Like what are you talking about? Like what a worthless
but here are the pitches. I have it right here.
Yeah, like what a worthless way to approach something that's like here's like a better video would be here's how to like tune your snare drum to like, oh, I don't know. See, and that's why people
here's how to play musically in a rock setting.
Or like how to tune a snare drum to, enable better ghost notes. That's like a more worthwhile pursuit of like, I want a snare drum where these ghost notes are going to cut through. So I don't know, man.
No, hey,
flipping that mindset.
I was just talking about this on Saturday because I had a drummer watching me from off stage. As soon as I got off, he's like, dude, you sound so good, man. What snare is that? I'm like, it's pork pie.
So it's the classic.
I've got the Evans hybrid head on it. He's like, is that Kevlar? I'm like, yeah, man. And it's like, it's kind of, I mean, it's still somewhat resonant, but it's just enough dead where
what Kevlar do you have?
We got the hybrid head on there.
On a snare drum?
Yeah. It's bitching, man. I'll bring it in here when we're done. Dude,
it's Kevlar head on your snare drum?
It's the hybrid's good
Comes straight off the football field.
It's the hybrid sounds
Broadway's
good for
not
either.
too far off.
But the thing is, like, I'm playing, and I said it to him, I was like, I play so many notes that it is nice to have a little more attack and less resonance.
Now we're
happening.
talking.
Yeah. Like, I'm playing a lot of notes.
Yes,
So,
that's the exact, like, what's the best snare drum head?
Yeah.
What a pointless question if there's no context given as to, like, for a jazz gig where you're playing quietly but you want resonance, or for a rock gig where you're just slamming and you need to make sure that, like, it can cut through and live through 5 nights of being on the road. Like, context in asking why is often a much better route to actually get the answers you want. The reason people don't do it, the reason I don't do it, is because it's much harder to, like, do that than just, like, show up and be like, oh, so that was like a paradiddle diddle? Oh, sick, dude. Like, that's much easier.
It's easier to ask, oh, what snare was that? Okay.
But
This is the answer. Cool. Add the cart. That's easy.
You can't get, I don't think maybe you can, but to serve what you are doing and to not belittle what you're doing, I think the way that you derive why, or the way that you can begin to understand someone's why, is by understanding their what. Like, if you don't know even what they're doing, then you probably can't really, you can't get to why.
Exactly.
Like,
Totally.
Why would you do that? Well, that's not even a question you can begin to ask if you don't know what the hell is happening.
Why did you do what? Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And that is really important. I remember when I had name drop, when I had Aaron Sterling on my podcast, one of the things he said, like, because I was just really focused on, like, it's all about, like, the sound, man. It doesn't matter, like, what sticking you're using. Blah. He was like, yeah, but, like, so, like, you do have to, like, you do have to have a period where you are working on, like, your paradiddles, or, like, you are focusing on that side of it. Like, everyone's in a different spot with their drumming, with their music, with their life. Not everybody wants to listen to, like, me pontificate about, like, philosophical shit that they don't, like, they're like, oh, I actually just bought a drum set, like, last week. Like, I actually don't know what a paradiddle is. Like, I actually do maybe need to only focus on, like, what basics. A paradiddle is right now.
Talk to us about, and this is a concept that I've brought up and I've quoted you a few times on this podcast.
Ooh.
The concept of,
this is meta.
Concept of deep work.
Okay.
Because again, in segue from the transcriptions and just your work ethic, you're not just uploading a few transcriptions in a year. I mean, you're pumping these out, at least maybe during the thick of it, like, pretty quickly and, like, very efficiently. I know some of the projects that I've hired you for have also been that way. So I would love to hear you briefly talk about, like, your work ethic and that concept of deep work, and because it's something that's needed for such granular work such as transcriptions. Right?
Yeah, that's cool to hear. And I think, like, one of the things that I have, I think I have a natural inclination and brain for, like, efficiency. And again, a lot of the stuff I focus on now is like deprioritizing efficiency, because I've spent most of my life focusing on, like, gotta be quicker, gotta be harder working, gotta be, like, just get after it, man. You gotta fine tune the blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it's like, but, like, nah. We actually don't necessarily need to trim 7 minutes off our grocery trip. Like, it'll be fine. We actually can just, like, burn the 7 minutes doing it this way because it's, like, easier. We actually, like, don't need to, like, efficientize our, like, grocery trip. It'll be fine.
You can actually, the scenic route is okay sometimes.
Yeah. So I do want to caveat all of this with like, even, like, the name of my podcast, Your Good Get Better, comes from, like, this whole, like, it comes from Mad Men, and it comes from this whole, like, to me, that quote resonates with me because I, like, you can always do something better. You can always be a little more efficient. You can always be whatever. And I think for me, one of the things I'm always looking for is, like, what is a little thing I can do to trim off a redundant chink in the workflow? What's something that, like, to me, I'm engineering a session tomorrow and I have to track a song for someone tomorrow. And then I have, like, a couple other lessons or whatever. Like, it's actually really beneficial to me to be able to, when I need to, take a song from they send it to my email to I'm sending them stems. It's, like, really beneficial for me to have, like, that really ironed out and really quick. Because again, maybe my sounds are better than someone else, but if it takes me 4.5 weeks to get that song back to the producer, they're like, cool, dude, you can have the best sounds in the world. I don't have a month to wait for your, like, stems back. Sorry. So having a Pro Tools template that is like bulletproof, where like everything makes sense. Like sometimes it really is as simple as like, I know it's going to be lame. Take 2 hours on a Saturday where you have nothing going on and build a Pro Tools template that is just like, okay, when I'm tracking, here's, again, think through all the stuff like we were talking about earlier. Think through everything.
Yeah,
like,
same principles.
So they send us the song and like, I have a separate bus for this and blah, blah, blah. And like, I need these inputs here. And like, sometimes I want to track like percussion. So I need that like just floating down there and active. And like, sometimes I do tom overdub. So let's actually just build out a tom overdub little section here. I can engage it when I need it, like whatever. Like those 2 hours are not something you're going to be like thrilled about doing, but it might literally save you. Like the amount of time it could possibly save you is like insane. And so for transcribing for me, the way that I got quicker at it was I realized that most people, what they're doing is in transcribing is like, you have your song that you're transcribing, pull it up in iTunes or whatever, QuickTime player, and you hit play, you listen, you pause, write out some stuff, flip back over to iTunes, scroll back, hit play, listen to it, pause it, flip back over to Finale, tweak it a little bit, flip back over. Like every time you're flipping between programs, every time you're having to rewind the song and find where you were at to try and listen to it and play it again, all of that is like minute by minute, you're just accumulating just so much wasted time. So what I was like in college, what I realized is like, I need a program that I can slow stuff down and loop it infinitely. And that way, if I need to listen to one beat of the song or one measure of the song or 4 bars of the song, if I'm charting a song, I can loop it and it's just going to loop and I don't have to do anything and I can just figure it out. So like when I'm transcribing, and I have like a couple of YouTube videos because I felt like this was something I've definitely never heard anyone talk about. So I just kind of walk through, like I literally just set up a 1-bar loop and loop it infinitely until I figure out what the measure is. And
You
then
have
I
it like
move to the
30%
next one.
speed, right? I mean, just when you say slow,
sometimes
it's
it all
like
depends
like how complex it
And
is,
that's
right?
something that I've actually like in transcribing, I've actually now tried to like, I try to hover at like 80% speed for most of what I'm transcribing now, because at this point I'm like, oh, I just want to get better at like, you
want your processor stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I want to be able to, I want to hear better. I want to hear quicker.
And ultimately, if the faster it is, the quicker it'll get done.
Yeah. That
Accurately, of course.
Maybe. Kind of.
Yeah.
But like when you're
there's a
talking,
threshold.
when things aren't in linear time, which like transcribing something isn't in linear time, it's just like sometimes slower speeds actually do yield like faster results because you're able to hear things more clearly,
right.
In fewer plays. But now I'm trying to like keep things quick because I want to still, it's just like, I have no shame about taking it to 20% speed if I need to.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's just kind of like one of the nerdy things where I'm like, I don't know, might as well just like try and hear
You're
it
just
at
trying to
80%
level up.
speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, that's the. So Andre Neary, when he played guitar with Virgil on the tour that I teched for him, and I remember one day they were talking about him and Chris Clark, the piano player, were talking about listening to and learning other people's parts, and I'm just like, I'm just a fly on the wall listening to them in the back of the van. And did you ever slow down parts and learn them like that? No. Like, these guys never slowed down parts. That's like inhuman to me. I'm like, I for sure have been slowing down parts since forever.
Same.
Like that's the way I did it. Like, or not everything, but whenever I get confused, I'm like, hey, look, YouTube. And way before YouTube, people were doing this on record players. You could set your record player to play things slower, or people would stack quarters. I heard of people doing that with Buddy Rich records. They would stack quarters on it so it spins slower.
Oh my gosh.
And they would take, I'm like, that's brilliant. That's awesome. So that's been happening forever. But there are people out there with freaking crazy ears. I'm like, so that's cool that you're like, okay, I'm going to try to hover at 80 because I don't want to have to go.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it like. I don't know what it does. I just know that I haven't done it that way before. So I'll also do it that way.
I know what it does. I mean, I don't know maybe the exact process of what it does, but it's what you said. You're like, I want to hear faster.
Yeah.
It will. That will make you hear faster.
I mean, one of the speaking of JoJo Mayer, one of the things that he said, something to the effect of like, drumming isn't always about how fast you can play. It's about how fast you can hear.
Yes.
And I like
That's great too.
truly believe that. But sorry, so to get back to your thing about like deep work.
Oh, you're good, yeah.
So like I try to trim as much fat off of any process as I have, because I think that, and again, sometimes like you need to take the scenic route, but sometimes, often we aren't taking a true stock of like exactly where all our time goes. And like one of the things that I've started doing is like most days when I'm working, my phone is either across the room on a bookshelf or across the room on a bookshelf inside a book that looks like a book, but it's actually a safe. That when you open the book, it's like a safe in there, and I literally lock my phone in a safe.
I've heard of people doing that.
So, and actually I started keeping my phone far away from my desk when I was working a while ago, but I had JP Bouvet on my podcast, and he said that he had a phone box or something. And I was like, what is that? And he was like, I actually have a box I put my phone in. And I was like, I'll do you one better. I'll get a book that is actually a safe, but it looks like a book.
So how does that work? It locks it in for a preset time, or?
It's just the act of like, this is the kind of thing that I think people don't realize is like every time, and I don't mean to demonize phones. I obviously use my phone. It's how I got here to do this. And it's also how I post on Instagram. It's not like I don't use my phone. Yeah. But something that I'm like really passionate about is like, I noticed at a point in my life that you can look up your screen time on your phone, and there was no day that I ever woke up and told myself, you know what? I think I want to spend 4 hours on my phone today. That was never a thought I had, but there were multiple days that would just end up, and I'd look at my screen time and be like, oh shit, I spent 4 hours on my phone. Oof. And again, if you want to spend 4 hours on your phone, because it's a way that you unwind or it's a way like whatever, I'm not here to tell you shouldn't do that. What I decided was, I woke up today and I did not allot 4 hours to this. However, I still spent 4 hours on this. Right? This is not good. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, having that control.
Right. And in the same way, if like, I bought a bottle of whiskey last night and then tonight I'm going back to pour some and it's gone, I would then go, wait a second. I don't think an issue. Yeah, I don't think I meant to drink a bottle of whiskey in 24 hours, but I did. This is maybe something I want to figure out.
It's a good parallel.
So to me, with the phone, like it's astounding. So like you referenced deep work, and like that's a book that I read, and like I got really nerdy about it at some point. But I think that like the basic thing that you can take away from it is like we don't realize how much we're paying when we switch from a task to another task and back to a task. Mm-hmm. Totally. So like with transcribing, I swear there are some transcriptions that could not be done if every 2 minutes there was like a notification coming through that I was even just looking at or whatever. Because like your attention, we cannot multitask as humans. It's not possible. Our brains can't multitask. Yeah. All we can do is switch very quickly between tasks. So if you are doing a lot of things all at once, like all of those things are suffering from spreading your attention to all those things. And that gets back to the drumming we talked about earlier. Like if while you're playing, you're thinking about like that email that frustrated you and how you're in an argument with your parents and how you're blah, 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 blah. Like all of that stuff is taking away, is leaching energy, is leaching focus from like what you really should be focusing on, which is like the task at hand. Yeah. So I just think that like, as an experiment, take a day where, make sure your ringer's on for like the people that would call you when, the house is on fire or the kid is in the hospital or whatever. Like make sure that they can get through, but then like put your phone in another room and just like, don't touch your phone for a day. And like at the end of that day, take stock of like, I can look at the amount of hours I spent and tell you with 99% certainty, like, what kind of day it was. And it's all based on, and I don't know, it's a chicken and egg situation. I don't know if like I spend more time on my phone so the day gets worse or the day is bad. So that makes me want to spend an escape to my phone or whatever it is. Yeah, it probably depends on what the situations are. But like, as far as working goes, like if I'm in a set, like, and again, you have to be able to like communicate to those around you because this can reach an impractical level. But like my wife knows like at some point, I'm working from like 6:30 or 7 in the morning until like 5 at night. Mm-hmm. So in those hours, I want to be interrupted with as little as possible if it doesn't need to be handled within those hours. So my wife knows that like if we need to talk about going to visit my sister and brother-in-law in Atlanta next weekend, like that this is not something that has to be handled right now.
Yep.
So I've just tried to be really clear, like, hey, I want to talk about all that stuff. Put it in a note, send me a text, do whatever. We're definitely going to talk about it. Let's just not talk about it now.
Yeah.
Or like there was a period of time where I realized like when she would get off work at like 4:30, and at 4:30 I'm now seeing 5, and I really want to be protective of like the time that I'm working and when I'm not working. So I'm seeing 5 coming up, and I'm like, all right, shit, let's get it done. 30 more minutes, dead sprint to the finish line. Let's go. And she would call me like right when I'm entering that mode.
Yeah.
She's thinking like, I just got off work. I'm going to commute. I want to figure out if we're actually going to dinner tonight or blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
her mode is totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm in a sprint. I can finish this one thing if I just, these 30 minutes are going to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I just had to have a conversation of like, hey, I totally get it. If you need me at the end of work, definitely call me. But if whatever you're doing, calling me can wait like those 30 minutes, I would love it if we didn't. And she's like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, and that's so healthy in a relationship to communicate it like you did.
But that really is the kind of stuff that I look for is like, because sometimes it can be as simple as that of like, oh, I get a ton of work done at this time. And if no one interrupts me and I just let everyone know, like during this time, I'm going to be like coked out in my studio working as hard as I can.
Oh, really, Tim?
Like, if like just communicate to people, and then the expectations there for you and everyone else, and it's like great. And I think a lot of people just either don't think through it or aren't willing to talk about it or commit to it or whatever, and that's when like things get like really weird. So
Yeah, that's great. And to bring it back to the phone thing, I think that's become more normalized. You know, for going to bed, for sleeping, right? Probably heard of people doing that for,
Yeah.
phone in the other room, I'm going to
Yep.
bed. But I think that's totally great. But that's also, I think, kind of the easy route. Because, okay, you're sleeping, you're probably not going to be on your phone anyway. But to apply that for like a task, when
Yeah.
you're working on something, to not have the phone there. 'Cause like you said, those notifications are going to pop up. Even the screen lighting up is a distraction.
Yup.
So I think we can all do better at actually applying that to the daily task as well.
Do you know, do you listen to Andrew Huberman?
I was going to say that next.
Man, Huberman is the man, first of all. Check him out. Great podcast, tons of incredible information. But one of the things I learned from listening to him is when they've done extensive studying on this, but when you are learning something, first of all, you want to have your focus on it entirely. They learned that if you do 10 seconds on, fully attending to that, doing the actual thing, and then 10 seconds off, not switching your attention, not task switching at all, like keep still thinking about the thing, not doing any other things. Your brain actually plays it back. It's something like 10 times what it would just if you were just to repeat the process.
Yeah.
And then that's not even to say how much you would be losing by switching, looking at your phone, checking
Right,
text
yeah.
messages, looking at Instagram, all that shit. So my friend Mark, shout out Mark French, is a guy I'll be playing with him in
French
in a little over an hour at Tootsie's.
Shit.
But
All right.
yeah, he and I have talked about this. He actually is slowly writing out his whole like practice theory based on this stuff. It's like, yeah, man, it really works. 10 seconds on, just you do the thing for 10 seconds and then you nothing for the next 10 seconds. And that's his whole practice regimen. Is that like you learn so much faster doing that.
It's funny. That's like a micro example of like what they say about sleep, right? Like you can sleep on a problem, and the reason like you can come back to it the next day and it's solved is because like whatever happens in sleep, like your brain like jigsaws it all together and is like
that's where actual adaptation occurs, is during rest.
Yeah, man, that's fascinating. I also just think like something as simple as like if you're gonna practice and you really want to get like, because I think part of what's built into the whole like phone thing is like locking it in a box can seem intimidating because you're like, oh God, like what if someone needs me? What if blah, blah, blah. But think through like, so let's say you want to practice for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Think through like in the next hour, what could happen where like an emergency would happen if I didn't have my phone for this hour? It would be a problem. Chances are like catastrophic stuff aside, like nothing's going to happen within an hour where if you don't respond in that hour, the fire will have spread large enough to where it's now not repairable. You know what I mean? So it's like most likely the world and you will survive an hour without you responding to whatever comes in.
Yeah.
So if we can admit that, then do yourself the favor of just set a timer for an hour on your phone and put it across the room. Because what'll happen now is like, you know that at an hour, it'll go off and you'll know it's an hour and you can go back to your phone and you can check it or whatever. But what that'll give you is like the ability to truly go wherever you want to go. You don't have to check the clock. You don't have to look at anything. Like even before I left to come here, I had like 45 minutes of chill out time. And I set a timer whenever I needed to like get ready to leave. Cause I was like, I want to like, whether I'm watching YouTube or playing 2K or doing whatever, like I want to just do that. I don't want to be checking the clock. I don't want to ever like, we have these things called timers we can set. And now I can just focus on like whatever. So like if I was in your position, I had to go to a like Tootsie's tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I would just make sure like, okay, at the very latest, I need to leave at X time. And I set a timer for that.
Which
now
I was actually, as you were saying, I was like, man, I should have done that because I checked the phone once 15 minutes ago, and I was just like, okay, we're good.
Yeah,
but I didn't even want to have to do that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And it's those little, to get back to the question you asked like 12 hours ago. Yeah. That really is the kind of stuff I'm looking for in my life. Is like, where am I burning energy that could be totally soaked back up and reabsorbed into something else if I just did this or I did this? Because a lot of times those answers, those like solutions are there. You just don't realize it. And sometimes it's as simple as like, you really need to learn better keyboard shortcuts in Logic.
100%.
Like, you know, that kind of thing not only saves you a bunch of time, it makes it easier to work on it, which will keep you inspired for longer. Like sometimes it's really just that simple of like, if you're hunting and pecking through like drop-down menus and Pro Tools, like you're not doing it right. Yeah. That's not it. That ain't it. Learn those keyboard shortcuts. It'll be a pain, but the more of those things you learn, the quicker you'll be in it. And the more you'll be able to take a song from taking an hour to record to 37 minutes. Like I'm engineering the session for an artist tomorrow. They're, a buddy of mine is playing drums. This is a weird, long story, but he's essentially like, yeah, I'm hoping like we can track drums and then I'm hoping we can also like comp and edit. Cause like, I'm not good with that stuff yet. And it's like, yeah, I can do that. Like that's something that's hindering his workflow. That's not only meaning he has to like hire out, which again, I'm happy to do the work for him. Right. You know, he's going to pay me to do the work. So that's great. But he's having to hire out for it. But it's also, so he can't do it and he's having to pay money for someone else to do it. But he also is now like, that comes with like a certain amount of stress of like, okay, tomorrow we're going to show up for 3 hours. We've booked Tim's studio for that long. We're going to have to track this drums for this song and leave enough time to make sure we can like go through playlists, comp together the take and like, you know, get it, you know, that's adding even if it's not going to push up against time limits or whatever, that's adding a certain like thing that just wouldn't be there if he was like, yeah, just fucking send me all the files and I'll just dig through all of it and like I'll you know, I'll comp it whenever my kids go to bed and I got like 2 hours to just sit around and do it. Yeah. So I'm just always looking for stuff like that to like make my and everybody else around me's life easier, hopefully.
Yeah. Love it. That's great advice. Well, the irony too is like you can actually use your phone even if you don't want to go extreme and lock it away or not see it, but you can, again, set timers, or now with iPhones, you have like the focus modes, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you could get all granular with it and pretty complex, but you can make it so it's actually working for you, you know, not against you.
Yeah. Although they are engineering phones for you to use them more.
Oh, 100%.
And longer.
Same as social media platforms.
Yeah, which again is like, I don't think it's...
It's like, hey, we the classic response, right, is like, well, now we're showing you how much time you spend on it. Or it's like, we're showing you how much sugar is in this food. That's not actually solving the problem.
Right. Well, but I also think it's like, it's up to us to, I think we'll look back in like 20 years and be like, what the hell were we thinking? Not, because like, you know, cigarettes, like now we all understand. And again, I have people I love dearly in my life that smoke cigarettes. They just smoke cigarettes knowing like, yeah, it's probably not, it's definitely not making my health better.
Wait, are cigarettes bad for you?
So there've been some studies done. It's the same with like junk food or whatever. Like I think everybody knows like eating an entire bag of Doritos while you watch a TV show is a decision that probably isn't bettering your health. And that's fine because you can engage with that product however you want and go like, yeah, okay, so I probably shouldn't smoke a pack today, but I'm gonna. And like, yes, they make those products to be addictive or whatever. But as a culture, we understand like the whole reason we tell kids like, don't smoke is because it's addictive. And we have these like adopted societal norms of like, this isn't good for us. Mm-hmm. So let's make sure we have clear boundaries around it. Yeah. And what we've done with phones is we're like, we don't fucking care. Just do it as much as you want.
Yeah.
And then it starts to hinder people's health and it's bad for us and it increases anxiety and it does all these bad things. And the companies are like, well, we're going to show you how much screen time, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, what we should be doing, especially as like adults, especially like us in the room, we're like of an age where we saw a world without smartphones and world with smartphones. Mm-hmm. Like, I think like it's up to us to decide like, how much do I really want to use this thing? And what do I have to do to make sure I only use this thing that much?
Yeah.
And like, it's hard. There's a lot of days I don't like my goal is to only spend 60 minutes a day on my phone. There's a lot of days where it's not 60 minutes.
Yeah.
There's some days where it's 38 minutes. And those are some of the best days of my whole life.
Yeah.
There are a lot of days where it's not 60 minutes.
Oh, same.
And usually those days don't
longer.
feel as good.
Yeah.
So, and again, 60 minutes is extreme, but I'm lucky. I don't have to leave the house most days. I work in one room. All my business usually runs through email. So like I have all these things where like I don't have to have my phone, but I've built out a life where I've tried to do that as much as I can because I just realized at some point, oh, this thing just like owns me.
Yeah.
And that was also the really stressful thing about touring full time is like there were instances where like, and I think this is a tacky way to get a sub for a gig, but like there were like band leaders that would just text like 10 different drummers and be like, not in a group thing, but like copy and paste the same message to 10 different people and be like, hey bro, like, are you free? Like for this run of shows, like pays this much, like, you know, like we gotta like our drummer. Blah, blah, blah.
Covered.
Yep. And then, you see it.
Oh, son of a bitch. You didn't just send that to me.
Yeah. You're out on a run. You come back and you check your text and you're like 38 minutes ago. Oh yeah, dude, bro, I'm totally free. And they're like, yep, covered. And you're like, 38 minutes was the difference there.
I'm just a data point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I do have sympathy for people that live in other, like either industries or have a different business thing than I do. I'm really privileged and fortunate enough to just like, I've been like, I work through email pretty much.
Yeah.
And if you email me, I'll usually get back within a business day. That's just kind of how it rolls. Good. I don't do Saturday and Sunday usually. And I'm not going to check my email like 20 times a day, usually on good days. Like once toward the morning, once toward the end of the thing, and then I'm out. And like, not everybody has the privilege of like being able to design that based on like what they do for work or whatever. But like, I've just tried to build that because I realized like, oh, you can literally spend a whole day just like sending bullshit emails to people and not actually do anything.
Just refreshing. Like,
and especially for us, like no one's paying me an hourly wage to just like respond to emails. There are some industries, there are some professions where like there is a certain culture where like you got to respond to email. There's like a certain portion. And again, for these businesses, it's just like,
I think it's super weird.
Well, and I think like there are a lot of businesses that just don't realize that like stop sending so many emails because everybody's wasting time or whatever. But for me, like no one's paying me to respond to emails quickly.
Yeah.
People are paying me to like get a transcription back quickly.
An email is the avenue that you're communicating.
Yeah. Right? But like me responding to email quickly and me transcribing quickly are not the same thing.
Right.
And
actually the one thing sounds, you think in the moment, because you're not getting an email back from me, that's slowing down my process of getting the thing that you want. But actually that's the thing that's helping me get the thing that you want.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to like communication. Like I've had to have, there are a couple of producers I work with really closely that like I've had to have heart to hearts with where I'm like, I know that you and I operate different Enneagram, different ends of like Myers-Briggs, like whatever you want to call it. Like we aren't the same thought process. I just need you to not do this. All I'm asking is like, don't send me 7 different texts, stream of conscious as you're thinking them. Just put it all in one email.
Yep.
And I promise that's going to do us a lot better than whatever. But I'm constantly referring people, like even on Instagram, I'm like, if someone asks me like a good, thoughtful, detailed question on Instagram, I'm like, shoot me an email.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be able to give them a better answer responding via email than I am just like, while I'm watching some show, half paying attention, also like DMing on Instagram. Like, I might answer their question generally. Tomorrow, when I'm in the studio and I'm going through my email, I'm going to give them a way better answer. A lot of times I record a little voice memo and I'm like, here's my thoughts. And they get like a 4-minute voice memo. And like, they're like, damn, that was crazy. That was the best answer ever. And it's like, actually, that was like easier than me crafting an artful like paragraph email. Like, so it's like, it's workflow stuff like that I've tried to just like commit to. And then like, there is a sense of rigidity of like, send me an email. No. Send me an email. And I have certain clients that like, they have my phone number and they'll be like, yo, I got a song for you, blah, blah, blah. They'll send me like 5 different texts of like information. They're like, I want it to be like that other song we did with like the New Orleans thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
send me an email.
Send me an email.
Concise your thoughts for you.
Yeah.
'Cause you don't even know what you want, clearly.
Yeah.
Put it together. We'll figure it out.
Send me an email.
You're like Papa Swolio that, hey, go to the fucking gym.
When you get a t-shirt, send me an email. Send people. Yeah, I think like the tools we use matter. I
Send
think
me
that's
a
also
fucking
what
email.
You're saying too. Because I work at Pearl here in Nashville, and like we get so many DMs of like artists trying to get endorsements. It's like the fact that you're DMing me is like, that's not professional. Like that should be an email, or at least ask for the email. But we'll get paragraphs of messages all the time.
Sure.
Think about the person also that's running that Instagram account is probably not the person even in charge of that thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the tools matter is what I was trying to say.
But you're also hitting on a good point of like, always think about what does the person you're talking to need? Because that isn't always what you need.
Yeah.
And you might realize that it'll go a lot further. Like, and that was always my thing with like with Vic Firth and the VF Jams transcription thing. Like I was always trying to just like show them like, this is not only something that I have, but it'll be something that you can do and leverage really easily with minimal work. You don't have to reshoot video. You don't have to do anything. Like you can use the video you already have and have this thing. Because my thought was always, it's like reuse value.
Right.
And like who doesn't want to be able to reuse content they have to like make new content that also hits a different thing. It's like, keep that in mind when you're talking to someone. Like guys, everything's a negotiation. Okay. No, I'm not going to be that guy.
Love it. So you were recently nominated for a Grammy. You want to discuss that?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of thoughts about this. So it was technically it was a Latin Grammy.
Latin Grammy. Yeah.
It's actually an album that I played a bunch of tunes on, and it was an interesting thing because I feel like, and I actually posted about it on Instagram recently because I just had a lot of thoughts about like, so if you told like 12-year-old me that I was going to have a Latin Grammy one day, I'd be like, damn, that's dope. That'll probably be the end of my career. I'll sail into the sunset because of that. But then it happens. And there was like, when I found out about it, there was this moment of like being really happy and like excited and proud and all this stuff. And then it kind of just like devolved into like, a Latin Grammy isn't like a Grammy.
Oh.
And like, I don't know if I'm going to win it anyway. So like, it's also just like being nominated.
Yeah.
And like, literally, it's funny to talk about this right after we just talked about like, you can always refine stuff. You can always make stuff better. You can always like trim this and get this better and like blah, blah, blah. The flip side of all of that is like, you're able to go through a whole life and like hit landmark moments and then not realize they were landmark moments because you were so focused on like what was next, or that's fine. But like I've already like, because I literally can pull up that session in Pro Tools right now and listen back and be like, yeah, I mean, I was still micing the kick drum this way. And like, I still blah, blah, blah. And like, I now I would do it this way. And now I would, blah, blah, blah. And it could be better and whatever. So like, it's fully possible to go through life and actually achieve a lot of the things that like the 10-year-old you would want and then never realize that you were doing it. And I think that this again is like another reminder, like the Benny Greb course being released with the transcriptions that I did and the Latin Grammy happening at the same time were like interesting because it was at a time where that was like, I think like a month ago that all this stuff kind of started happening. And it was a time where like work-wise things just like dipped. And I was just kind of like working on like, I'm going to do an update of the Aaron Sterling book, which will already be out by the time this comes out and all this stuff. So like, I was just kind of like working silently on things, but nothing was like really like happening. And then that stuff happened. And I like, it was a good reminder of like, yeah, this is just kind of like what it is.
Yeah.
Like whether you win the Grammys or you don't win the Grammys or you never get nominated for the Grammys, like stuff's going to happen and it's never going to look like what 10-year-old you thought it was going to look like. So you just kind of have to like really soak that stuff in when it happens because it isn't supposed to look a kind of way. It unfolds how it unfolds. And again, like all the way back to what we talked about in the beginning, like the more you show up with like, this is like the expectation you arrive with, the baggage you arrive with of like, this is how it's supposed to sound. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is what I'm going to play. This is what I'm blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff starts to weigh down the opportunity that could have happened if you would have not showed up with all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, of all the stuff I played on in the last like year, is that the project I wish had the Latin Grammy attached to it? Maybe yes, maybe no.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably other stuff I played on where I'm like, that's a cooler drum part.
Yeah. Or that was mic'd more properly or something.
I don't get to make those decisions though. Like it is what it is. And like,
yeah, that's a really good perspective.
It's awesome.
We were just talking about this with Kip last episode. Sort of the idea also of just like giving your best work and see what sticks.
Yeah.
He was talking about the Keith Urban cut. Like he didn't expect that goofy demo would actually get picked up.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have those expectations, something actually came from it, you know? And now he can reflect back and have those small wins, or in that case, a big win, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a pretty healthy way to look at it.
Yeah, and there's no chance that if you were like, if the week that I had worked on that project that was nominated, you had asked me like, yo, what'd you work on? There was no chance I would have ever been like, I think I just worked on the project. It's going to get nominated for a Latin Grammy. Like there was no chance of that.
Yeah. Mm. And you would never say, "Oh, well, I'm shooting for the Latin Grammy on this one. This is
this is the Latin Grammy sound."
Yeah. It's like probably not gonna win.
The Latin Grammy sound. But I do think there's, again, at some point you have to arrive at like being able to know everything can always be better, and also know that like this is what I tell a lot of my students that are like starting to play for the first time. Like, if you're on stage and you're giving it your all and you're fully present, there's no need to attach like a good or bad or could this be better or whatever, because like you're doing everything you can in that moment.
You already won at that point.
Like, right. And later you can, and this is something I've talked about more and more. Like I feel like at some point in college, I realized that like, so there's a period of when you're practicing, and literally this can be like within the same practice session. You need to have periods of time where you're practicing things and you're really analyzing like, that's good, that's bad, this needs to be like more unison, and this is blah, 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 and like the timing, and I'm rushing, and I'm whatever. You need to be like practicing and engaging all of that stuff. But you also need to practice the ability to just like play drums and attach as little emotion and like analytical processing to it as possible.
Yes.
And I feel like almost no one does that. And there's a reason why so many people feel like they can't just sit down and play drums, even though if I'm like, yo, break out Tommy Igoe's book, or like break out, or break out, that John Riley thing, and like play Exercise 7, and they're like, oh yeah, I can, and they do it, and it's just like, you gotta, at some point, you have to play drums and get familiar with like what it sounds like to just like do it. And not do it for a reason of it's got to be good or it's got to be bad or it's got to be this or I want to do it with this intention. Just like sit down and like do it and just see what happens. With literally bring nothing to the table other than like, I'm just going to sit down, hit drums and see what happens. And then if you practice that stuff, like you'll foster this kind of thing where like you're both able to engage the analytical side when you need to, and you're able to like turn that off and just be like, oh, like, so when I'm processing, like when I'm pulling up a Pro Tool session and I'm I want to get better mode. Like, what would I change about this? Like, what could be better? Like, could this snare drum sound a little different? Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you need to pull up the Pro Tools session and just listen and go, what a fun, cool thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wow. Like, I didn't even realize 2 years ago is when I started doing this kind of thing. I'm like, how fun is that? Like, that's cool. I did a YouTube video a while ago where I pulled up the first remote at-home session I ever did, and I tried to like redo it. And when I pulled up that first session, I was like, man, like I do hate how this sounds, but it sounds better than I thought it would.
Right.
And like, it's good to be able to do both of those things, be able to realize like, wow, God, I've gotten better than the first time I did this, and also still be able to be like, man, this could be so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not.
Yeah. Not to be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's another cool benefit of social media is you can literally now scroll back to your first few posts and be like, wow. Or your old YouTube covers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not for anybody else, but just for you. I know that's how I feel. I look at my old videos, I'm like, this sucks, but wow, I was only 12 and this is so
even
cool
for
to see
other
where I've
people,
come. Yeah.
Even for other people.
Right.
Because now someone who just bought their first mic setup is able to go back to one of your videos and go, wait a second, he's gotten better. I just watched a new video and I watched one that was 4 years old, and like, he wasn't that far ahead of me where I am now. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing about like people. Like, I just watched the Vanity Fair, Billie Eilish. She does the same interview every year on the same day. And like, certainly there's like weird things about all of everything being public and recorded forever. Definitely gonna acknowledge that that's a weird thing that isn't always great. But it is fascinating. Like, she talked a lot about how cool it is to have like this little time capsule of like, yeah, that was me. I hate parts of what that me is saying,
Man.
but it's also me. I think it's easy to try to avoid the stuff you didn't like or the stuff that you wish had been different, but just like soak it in and know that tomorrow is a day that you can change the stuff you didn't like, but you can also today appreciate the stuff that wasn't that bad.
You're in Brentwood now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite spots around town, restaurants, or Nashville, Brentwood?
Yeah. I would say like Burger Up in 12 South.
I was just there literally
great.
last night.
It's great.
Your favorite coffee spot?
Crema.
Yeah.
Crema, the original one on like Hermitage or whatever it is.
So I know you're a coffee guy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you do hot chicken?
Yeah, I have a whole thing about Nashville hot chicken that we definitely don't have enough time to get into. But
Part
really,
2.
really great wings. If you want really great wings, Sam's Place.
Same.
Sam's Place.
It's like a weird little local chain. Sam's Place in Nippers Corner has some pretty dope wings.
Okay.
Yeah. You mentioned 2K. Favorite video game?
Man. I mean, 2K is the like, let's have some people over and drink and like
Which
have
is
some
NBA
fun.
for those unfamiliar.
Yeah, NBA 2K.
Yeah.
But man, recently like the Hitman series has been the most insane, awesome series ever. I also played Deathloop recently, and Deathloop was sick. Yeah,
Cool.
Favorite book?
man. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley.
Love it.
Cool. No, and then give us the plug for your podcast as well.
Oh yeah, so I have a podcast, You're Good Get Better. It's about drums, it's about music, it's about life. It's super fun. I do a lot of different stuff, but I've had like Vinny Greb and Aaron Sterling and a bunch of fun people on, and I try to like mess with the format a little bit so that it's not just like 3 dudes and a mic talking. Like
With a drum head behind there. Yeah, man. Cool. Well, I think this has been so valuable, and there's been so much wisdom that we've talked about. I think people listening to this episode, I think people will, hopefully, it is our intent that people are getting better in all areas of their life, whether it's drumming or just
we covered a lot
in life. So
Yeah,
appreciate
covered a lot.
the time.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank
this
you.
is fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nashville Drummers Podcast. If you liked it, please consider leaving us a review on the Apple Podcast app.
Also, check out our new website, NashvilleDrummersPodcast.com. And if you're not already following us on Instagram, you can follow us at Nashville Drummers Podcast.
This episode was recorded at Diamond Sound Studios located in Nashville, Tennessee.
Sponsored by Music Lab Nashville, production by The Wise Company. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.